Welcome to Driven. I'm your host, Paul Perrone. We're going to learn and talk about AI, robotics, autonomous vehicles, and so much more. Check us out at driven.show on the web and give us a thumbs up or subscribe here if you like the show. So kick back or buckle up and become driven. Sev, good to meet you. No, we've met many times and we know each other. No, thanks for agreeing to be on this episode of Driven. We're going to talk about a lot of things, but most relatedly to the topic of the podcast is the fact that you're the VP, I think, of emerging tech for transit and rail at WSP, right?
Yep.
Based in DC. So, if you could just tell me a little bit about your journey from what brought you to automation and autonomy in the transit space at WSP.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me on, Paul. This is unusual for me to be on my podcast. Actually, I think this might be my first professional podcast, so I'm very excited.
It's not your first professional podcast. No, but thanks.
First
Thank
podcast.
You for that.
Yeah, so I've been with WSP now, it must be about 8 years, a little over 8 years. And my interest and fascination in automation took place when I was embedded consultant. And so what that means is I work for WSP, and it's a massive company, 70 plus thousand employees. And sometimes for limited periods, we have to support our clients on site, 5 days a week. And so I was an embedded consultant at Maryland Transit, working for a gentleman, Mike Helta, the Office of Innovation, fantastic individual. He actually brought me into transit and rail. So occasionally I'll reach out to him and thank him on the good days. On the bad days, I'll send him a text saying, what were you thinking? And so that was kind of my first start, just because working in the Office of Innovation was interesting because I was introduced to so many different facets of the transit and rail system. And I really took notice as far as taking on the problem solver approach. And I actually started working with some folks in the FTA, Office of Research and Demonstration, a little bit later in my career. And they had released in 2017, I want to say, the Strategic Transit Automation Research Program, STAR initiative. Transit and Rail, they love their acronyms, right? For better or worse. And so that was my first foray into automation and kind of understanding, the potential operational and safety benefits that automation could bring in certain use cases for bus service. Now, I will say, automation is no stranger to transit and rail. There's been automated trains for decades. Rubber tire, though, is different. But what's interesting about my personal aspect is I'm a big labor proponent. My wife, she works in the Department of Labor. She works in a small division, iLab, and so she actually negotiates international trade deals with other countries, trying to promote and encourage better situations for worker rights around the country. And so it's a big thing in our household. And I actually believe a lot of the labor unions around the United States or Canada, they provide not only a good service to community members, but also, from my personal perspective, is they also just provide good jobs. It's hard to find in this day and age good, well-paying jobs that are protected by labor unions. And so for me, I do just want to make the point. I know this is an automation podcast, but I think there are specific use cases for automation and driver assistance technologies, but that can still keep these labor unions strong. And I want to try to find that right balance.
Interesting. So really, it sounds like in the spectrum of automation, there's of course nothing, and then there's fully driverless, as they might say, or driver free, and then there's just assistive technology, like as you're driving, the ADAS functions, advanced driver assistance systems and functions can take over and prevent a collision, or to tell the driver things that that are there that they might not otherwise see. Is that your focus in sort of the automation spectrum, or are you also looking towards the full automation for different applications maybe as well?
Yeah, for different applications, I think full automation can make sense. Like in rail, I know there's some rail agencies that do not have operators right on the systems. However, you'll see employees getting off and on those rail systems, whether it's fare inspectors, customer service support. And as a passenger, it does give me level of comfort that I see employees riding the transit system. And I think that's an important from a customer satisfaction standpoint, from a safety standpoint. But I think there are a lot of benefits, especially from a safety perspective, for what I think automation solutions are going to be able to provide in the future. I still think the technology has some steps to go to advance, to continue to improve the technology, and they've made great strides, especially in the last couple of years. But my particular focus, and where a lot of my colleagues and our projects are focused right now, is these very confined operating spaces where we're taking advantage of automation. And I think, Paul, you know this as far as my acute focus on the Busyyard Automation deployments, just because it's such a fascinating use case for me, where it makes so much sense that the fact that buses come into the bus yard and they repeat the same maneuvers every day. And that's where I think automation shines, is repeatable maneuvers, confined use cases, and very clear benefits from a safety, financial, and operational standpoint. So that's what I've been laser focused on. And I've met some great folks along the way and continue to support some great clients as well that are interested in the technology.
That is interesting, and it's actually it's public information about Cap Metro, right, and that project, um, so sort of describe, not even, doesn't have to be specific to Cap Metro, but this, like, the process of bus automation in the yard, like from when the driver might sort of park the bus to then what happens, and like
Right.
all the things that can happen that is a benefit, and maybe the return on investment and the advantages to agencies and people alike.
Yeah, this is a fallacy of mine. I'm having these casual conversations and I get way too technical, way too fast. But
Oh, it's okay. People who tune in are
yeah,
love it. All right, so it's all good.
awesome. Yeah. So I will credit the FTA, their STAR plan. That this was the first instance where I kind of caught on to this use case of bus yard automation. So I definitely have to credit that group for that. Mary Leary, Molly King are doing some fantastic work. Danielle Diggs, and they had some specific use cases in their STAR plan as far as where transit can potentially benefit from. Just focused on bus, and so it was these small automated shuttles for paratransit support. It was bus rapid transit in certain use cases, but again, that I think is still a bit further away. And then they also focused on the automating the bus yard at higher levels of automation, because it's a confined area. It's private property, so the public can't access the bus yard. And the numerous use cases that you can use as far as parking the buses closer. Some of these bus yards, you can have anywhere from 50 buses up to over 300 buses
Wow.
in this yard, right? And so maximizing capacity in a bus yard is fundamental, just because commercial real estate, the prices for that is not going up. And so if you can actually fit more buses in a smaller footprint, that's going to be advantageous for any transit agency to take advantage of. And there's also infrastructure savings as well. But you asked me questions about how does a bus yard work? How could this use case work? How do drivers operate? And so typically, when a driver gets their assignment, they go every morning. They get out, they go to their locker, and they get their assignment of what type of work they're going to have to do that day. They walk from their locker room once they get their assignment, and then they have to walk through sometimes these large bus yards and try to find the specific bus that they're supposed to take out on their route. Now, they go through a pre-trip inspection, they pull their bus around, they go through the security gate, they go out and do their service, and then they come back at a specific scheduled time. Now, when they come back into the bus yard, this is where it gets interesting, at least for me. uh, they take all their cash and coin from the day. It's called vaulting. They vault it, and then they have to go and drive the bus. Sometimes different agencies do different procedures, is where the operator will go and park, and then yard hostlers take over all the other responsibilities as far as washing the bus, fueling the bus, which has to happen every day. Sometimes you don't wash the bus every day, and then they have to go and park the bus in a specific location, hoping that there are no mechanical failures. Sometimes there's preventative maintenance updates you have to do these buses. Sometimes there's corrective maintenance you have to do on these buses when a bus breaks a mirror or something on the street. And so my vision and what we have actually developed, I think, in this CAT Metro project in Austin, Texas is, okay, so if the bus driver comes back and once they vault and pull off the cash and coin, what if they could actually save their own time? And instead of driving the bus through the yard, they just go back to the locker. And then once that bus has removed the cash and coin, that bus can drive itself to a designated location. We call them missions. It stops there. It waits for when another yacht hostler pulls it forward, fuels, washes autonomously, and then goes parks autonomously. And then the level of precision that some of these vehicles can get, which I would love to talk to you more about the level of precision and how that's continuing to increase over the years. But these sensors can get a bus within 5 to 7 centimeters reliably, and that's fantastic. That's better than I can do consistently and reliably. And so that's where you can get these capacity savings and time savings. If an operator doesn't have to drive the bus, you're not having to pay that operator to drive the bus through the yard, them to walk back. Sometimes they're walking, and I've clocked this, sometimes they're walking 8 to 10 minutes through the yard back to the operator lounge. And sometimes those yards are exposed and it's cold in the wintertime. They don't necessarily want to be walking in those yards. And yards can actually be a very dangerous place for operators, because there's a lot of research out there that says most accidents occur 2 miles from your home, because you're so used to those roads. You're used to potentially driving at quicker speeds than you should be. And it's the same instance within a bus yard. It's very dangerous in a bus yard. Operators come back, they're tired from their day. It's stressful, and they may be taking turns too quickly. It can be dark in the yard. And so if there's a way to actually improve these environments and make them safer, I'm all for it. And so,
yeah, that's fascinating. And it's also, there's the comfort angle, as you're kind of alluding to as well. It might be a shorter walk from the building to where they're going to get picked, where they're going to jump onto the bus without rain coming down, and the bus is either air conditioned or heated, depending on the time of the year, for them to get on,
right.
and just sort of do what they do and drive on the public roads with it. That's fascinating.
Yeah. And so I think the long-term vision would be autonomous buses within the yard, improving the efficiency and the safety within the yard. The operator picks up the bus, and then you take advantage of these driver assistance capabilities in revenue service that's maybe making their job a bit easier. The object detection. They have to keep their eyes constantly on a swivel, 180 degrees, but you may not be able to pick up these pedestrians or cyclists, and these roads are narrow, right? And so any sort of technology solution that you could provide to make their driving a bit easier and a bit safer, it benefits them, benefits the transit agency, and it benefits the passengers.
Interesting. Yeah. Because all the same sensor technology, presumably, that's there to navigate the vehicle around the yard would be the same technology, if properly sort of specified, I guess, to do accomplish the ADAS function, right? So that you could achieve that. Meaning, like, you might need shorter range for the yard, but you would want longer range sensing for the road as well. So
right.
that could
Now,
be achievable.
Paul, you said something that caught my attention, and I have a question for you. So, as long as the sensors are set up correctly, well, I think transit is an interesting use case, because I think they could take advantage of the sensor technology that exists and make these vehicles safer. But what's interesting for buses in particular and automation that I think is going to require more testing and potentially more policy implications, as well as it's unbelted passengers, right? And so a big
Right.
feature of driver assistance technology is that automated emergency braking, right? Which has saved me numerous times in my own vehicles. So how do we install automated emergency braking systems in buses that will benefit by reducing the number of incidents that occur in urban streets without potentially jeopardizing the customers, the passengers that are actually on these buses?
It's a good question, and I've had the pleasure of working with Dr. B from the University of Alabama,
Hmm.
and he, you know, it's sort of a research sort of challenge that he and his team have tackled that we've tried to work with them on, but the or have been working with them on, and the idea is that exactly right. ADAS functions in consumer automotive is much different from ADAS functions in buses in the sense that you might have people standing up, you have people in seats where if the vehicle stops too suddenly, they're sliding around or falling
Yeah.
off the seat, and this includes not just buses, but like some of those autonomous shuttles and vans and what have you that to which this also applies. And so there's some thoughts on, well, slowing down, before you just sort of apply the brakes, sort of slowing down a little bit, and then sort of so that people know that something's coming and they brace themselves. And of course, warnings, audible and visual warnings, like, you know, prepare, prepare for, a stop.
Mhm.
And so that people can be ready for an emergency brake, which is the worst case,
Yeah.
AEB, because it's an emergency situation. You're braking as hard as you can without, causing damage to people inside and outside. But you're also, then there's forward collision avoidance, which is not as aggressive, but you're just following behind something and you're looking out further, and you can, it's a little bit less of a deceleration rate, so that it's not as jarring inside for the passengers. But yeah, AEB and that sort of those warning systems and being able to prepare people for braking is an important function
Yeah.
that's not necessary for, say, passenger vehicles.
Yeah. Yeah. I yeah, I would love to see some more testing around this. I think it's an important feature. And I know there's been some great statistics and some research done about, the forward collision avoidance and how many buses could be saved from all the maintenance hassle that goes around with transit agencies that they have to deal with. And those buses are not cheap to repair. I just know that, I used to ride the 70 route, Wilmota in Washington, D.C. And I think it's changed name now with the better bus network. But I remember Georgia Avenue going on these buses with my wife and kid in a stroller, and those buses would be packed,
Yeah.
packed people, tons of people sitting, tons of people standing, and those peak travel times. And this happens on the metro too. Sometimes you get these newer operators and they'll be brake checking a bit, even on the metro system, and it can kind of throw people. But I think the bus is a different animal, and I think it warrants further exploration. I think it has to continue. The safety benefits are just too great. So I hope it continues and we get some innovative investment.
Yeah. And then you have people like me who, for better or worse, I'm admitting a weakness here, is a germaphobe, and I don't like touching the handles.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah,
And
yeah. Well, I
so,
mean, more and more germaphobes now with COVID, right? I think
right,
twice
right.
about grabbing it. Yeah. So
And so, I'm sitting there trying to surf this vehicle if it's coming to a halt. Mainly, I'm thinking of the people movers at like the Dulles Airport,
oh
right?
yeah,
Those,
right, right,
and
right.
I'm trying not to hold on to something, and I don't want to bump into anybody, so I've got like a wide sort of stance, and it's difficult. So you have to think of those situations, and in fact, with automation, as you probably know, um, there's so many situations out there where the autonomous vehicle can overreact. I mean, it still
Yeah,
happens in
yeah,
the my wife has a Tesla. I see it in that, and I see it in every vehicle. It may, they call them false positives. It's going to stop a little more abruptly because it sees something, even though that's not really something to be concerned
Yeah.
about.
Yeah.
And that happens a little bit more frequently as people sort of tweak the system between being too aggressive and not aggressive enough, right?
Right.
So, and people will, developers of these systems will tend to err on the side of safety. So you're going to see more false positives, until like that can be more resolutely resolved across scenarios. And that's what's great about the applications you're talking about.
Mm.
Fixed routes, it's a little more deterministic. You kind of know the environment, the situations, the trouble points, and you can bake that into the mapping and the environment, much like a human driver would be aware of their particular route because they drive it every day, right? The system can build up knowledge of, this is a trouble spot. We know that there's going to be people kind of crossing the road here in a crazy fashion, so we're going to be a little more safe here. um, and like for me, driving down certain roads in Virginia, I know this is a spot where the deer are going to jump out, so I'm going to
Yeah.
slow down around here. So that kind of knowledge can be built into the systems to mitigate some of those events as well. Mapping, let's call it. What are your thoughts for some of, like, what are some of the, without being specific, unless you want to, the worst case situations where it's just common, the most frequent situation that's encountered on the road where ADAS could help, um, public bus transit operators?
Uh, that's a good question. I'm a bit biased because uh, I live in Washington, D.C., and I think the nation's capital may have some of the worst drivers in the United States. And so when it comes to that question, as far as what type of driver assistance systems could help operators in some of the streets in DC, Maryland, Virginia, they need a lot of help. There's just so many wild drivers. I would think the braking assistance would probably be the most important. Um,
Are there collisions? Like, I guess it's like, do you see in your experience or aware of, um, like any of the stats on, like, they just coming up and hitting other cars? Is it pulling in front of cars? Is it blind spots hitting pedestrians? Like,
I think it's
or
all the
maybe it's all,
above. I
all
think
of
it's
the
all the
above.
above. And I
Okay.
think, you know, most of the buses that you see on the road, they're about 40 feet long, 12, 13 feet wide. It's a massive vehicle. And so the amount of mirrors that are ripped off constantly. And you would think, okay, it's a mirror, not a big deal. But with the transit agency, uh, you can't drive that bus without a mirror, and you got to put in a ticket for it to be repaired. That's man-hour labors. That's inventory implications. That's time spent installing that mirror. Um, Not a lot of time, granted, but still it adds up, right? And these agencies, hundreds, if not thousands of mirrors are ripped off. And that's just one use case. I also
Yeah.
think there's going to be an interesting convergence with how we're seeing the direction for zero emission buses, hydrogen, and also battery electric. Battery electric in particular, taking advantage of driver assistance as far as deceleration and accelerating, and taking advantage of regenerative braking. I think there's going to be a
Hmm.
lot of energy efficiency gains from that standpoint in the future as well. What's interesting too, we've seen stats on the battery electric side that an operator's driving behavior, as far as how they're using the accelerator or braking, can impact the efficiency of a bus by anywhere from 25 to 30%, which is massive. So I think driver assistance systems, to a certain extent, can help kind of smooth that ride out and extend battery ranges even further.
Yeah, and that makes it. It is difficult to drive a bus. I've been in them and I've driven them, and it's yeah, it's not an easy task, especially when you have not just the form factor of it, the 40 feet, and then you've got people on the bus that can be a
It's
distraction,
loud. Yeah.
obviously, and then you've got the environment, a city environment in front of you. So it could be a stressful situation. It's very demanding on just one human being trying to ingest all this. So that assistance is as sort of a safety net. Hopefully, would be certainly a feature that makes driving a bus more pleasurable and less stressful, right, for the operator,
Yeah.
because you've got some of these things that are just going to prevent these accidents and all of the horrible things that could come with it, ranging from the minor to the horrible. So
Right. And this is part of the reason why, I love working with the people that I do in the department, the leadership at WSP that's enabled me to do these types of projects. It's the troubleshooting that I think I love the most. When we were at Cat Metro working on this deployment, we would start pretty early in the morning, and we would be out there till 10:30 at night, investigating what was happening, trying to improve it, and the troubleshooting to improve the capabilities of the technology. That's something that I love, and it's great to see other colleagues as well that I work with. It's the small improvements, it's the small wins, and I'm seeing a lot of that in the industry. And I think we're only going to continue to see further investment and use of these type of technologies as they improve. You see a lot of horror stories out there in the media about these Waymos that occur, as far as the not letting people out of the vehicles, having issues in the parking lot, driving around in circles. But on a day-to-day basis, for the amount of tens of thousands of vehicles, the technology that they're delivering and how it's going to transform the industry uh, is significant. So
yeah. And, and something happened recently, and I did a LinkedIn sort of post on it, and I was surprised by, like, I got the most sort of responses and impressions on it than anything I've ever posted. And because it was like a new edge case to me, and I'm thinking about this, like there was the situation in LA where I guess there was a bunch of Waymo vehicles that were being broken into and set on fire.
mm,
And my first reaction, I didn't know the situation at the time. I just saw the video and the images during during the events that were transpiring out there. And my first thought was, oh my God, what happens if there's a passenger in this vehicle?
yeah,
Right. And, like, maybe that wasn't the case, but because I guess I heard subsequently that maybe they just hailed the vehicles into the area so that they could damage them.
oh gosh, yeah,
So, not good, but, maybe at least not people inside. And I just started thinking, like, what happens if there's, and it doesn't have to be those kinds of, like, crowd, protest riot situations. It could be a situation where there's just, there's fires, right? Because there have been
right,
fires, in the US, or just some other situation. And then you have a vehicle that's driverless, right? In a situation where what should it do for the passengers inside? Like, yeah, some people might be able to get out and just walk away, but, like, if they're elderly or not mobile in
yeah,
some way, they're stuck. And it's a helpless situation, and you might not be able to teleop the vehicle through the crowd, or without hurting people in the crowd, or just aggravating the
yeah,
situation. And so it's this, it's so, and I started to think about it for the transit application, right, in the vans. And here's where we come back to, like, Waymo's doesn't have somebody in the vehicle. They do have a lot of remote teleop interventions, is my understanding. But that might not be viable in this situation. And so there's certainly a case for, you need, I think, in public transit with buses and vans, you're going to have people, concierges at that point, or whatever you might call it, even once the bus is fully driverless, there to assist the people on the vehicle. I guess that's kind of what I'm thinking is going to happen with transit. Do you have a different perspective on that, or?
No, I think to a certain extent that's already happening because transit agencies, what a lot of people don't necessarily realize is that the operator has a stressful job of moving people as quickly, as safely, as efficiently as possible. But then there's also a dedicated department. Usually it's called the operating control center for both rail and for bus. So not only are these bus drivers, driving through urban streets and rural areas as well, but they also have a support staff for OCC that is just eyes on the road. If there's incidents, they're radioing to the operator for how to proceed, cutting into other routes to go around if there's an incident or if there's a road closure. And so they already kind of have that infrastructure built in. And so that may expand, right, as this type of technology gets introduced. And it's, you mentioned the interesting edge case, which is that again is a fascinating edge case. And one of the reasons why I love working in the sector that we do. And something else that we're going to potentially do if the CAT Metro yard program goes to a phase 2, which I'm hopeful that it does, and I think the FTA wants to see that in CAT Metro as well, is unfortunately for the industry in transit, battery electric buses sometimes have thermal events where these batteries will overheat and they will cause these electrical fires. And when there's a electrical fire, a thermal event on a battery electric bus, you're not going to be able to extinguish that. It's when these batteries burn, and they take everything down with them. And is there a way, and I think we're going to actually test this and potentially in phase 2, if we can detect when a battery is potentially overheating and there's what's called a fault that you can get in real time where it's entered into a state, somebody needs to investigate this, but that's dangerous because then you're putting humans in harm's way. If you're going to investigate a potential bus fire, you don't want to send humans out there. And so what if there's a way where in real time, if there's a bus that is being detected a potential thermal event, it can simply geofence into an area where buses are surrounding that vehicle that's potentially overheating, can then autonomously drive away, and then you're saving millions and millions and millions of dollars in rolling stock expenses. So that's something else that we also want to investigate, which again, the reason why I love this technology and why I love the industry that I'm in is that's a very straightforward use case. The return is there, right? And that's a safety mechanism to help keep transit vehicles safe and continue operating.
That's a really good point. I mean, a lot of people don't realize what goes into the battery packs in these electric vehicles. And, I think it was my mom who was like, are they just like two big giant like D-cell batteries or something? And I'm like, no, it's a little more complicated than that, Mom. It's it's obviously there are many cells, and of course in a car there's and then there's cell packs, and each individual battery cell is monitored with some of these battery management systems, and you can tell not just the voltage and the current flowing through, but the temperature, as you say, of that battery. And one out of all the hundreds of cells might be getting hot, and you can detect that because that's going to be the thing that kicks off the chain of events. Right now, these battery management systems have ways to kind of mitigate that in real time for reliability. But like, there's a perfect example because we've implemented in the past with a different project for Neil Young. He had an early electric vehicle, a monitoring of every one of those cells. And so once you detect it, you can take corrective action. You can, as you say, if it's a bus in a bus yard and they're near other buses, move the bus out of the way. And because when there is a fire with these electric vehicles and buses, it's not just, as you say, something that's difficult to put out. It can be a very fast event. There's not a lot of time.
No, there was a huge bus fire years ago in Germany. I forget the town where it was, but it destroyed, I think it was 28 to 30 buses. There was also damage to the facility, These battery electric buses, unfortunately, they cost, um, for a 40-foot brand new battery electric bus, you're looking at 1.1, 1.2 million. So if you're losing 20 to 25 of those buses, that's detrimental. And then I think,
Yeah.
unfortunately, SEPTA also recently experienced a battery electric bus fire at one of their down facilities, which was really tough to see. SEPTA's had a hard time, and every transit agency's had a really hard time with this technology. Um, and it's not the transit agency's fault per se. It's we need to figure out how we can improve this technology, make it safer and better for the customers. And so I think the technology is evolving, which is good to see. But there's, I think, more innovative ways where we can save more of these buses, right, if these events do occur. And battery electric bus fires, electric vehicle fires, there's a lot of attention on it now because the technology is new, but the rate of electric vehicle fires still very, very small in comparison to these regular diesel fuel fires that occur
Really,
all the time.
even
They're just not
per
catching the news.
capita or
Yeah.
per yeah. Okay,
Yeah.
so the percentage is less.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, and I guess so. What is the rough? It seems like to do something for a fleet of vehicles in a bus yard, you have to deal with legacy vehicles no matter what. Diesel, there's going to be all kinds of different buses in a bus yard, a mix of electric and diesel for at least some period of time. And then, so automation has to have an ability to presumably bring a technology into those existing legacy vehicle platforms as to buying it out of the gate. Is that a fair statement, or what do you think? Do you think it's going to be more OEMs providing some of these ADAS functions from the factory, or you think it's going to be an aftermarket thing or a combination thereof for a while?
I think it's going to be a combination there for a while. I think the challenging situation with transit agencies is when you buy a bus, you get a warranty for a certain period of time. You put more money towards the warranty, you get a longer warranty. Uh, and there's also insurance and liability concerns as well, right? And so I think in the long term, it makes sense for the OEM that is selling the bus to the transit agency to also provide those ADAS and ADS, automated driving systems, those solutions once they come off the production line. Now, I think that complicates an already very complex vehicle specification process. That's another one of our goals is to kind of figure out a way of these buses are becoming so expensive. Is there a way that you can actually reduce and standardize some of these specifications just to decrease the costs? And that's kind of a big focus of ours for WSP to see how we can do that. And I realize I'm talking out of both ends here of trying to decrease the amount of equipment on a bus, but then also saying we should put automation technology on the bus. But I think it's all dependent on the use case. And if you can provide safety and operational benefits that are going to support financially for the transit agency, I think it's worth that investment. But I do think in the short term, it's going to continue to be retrofits of vehicles just because I think the margins are so slim for these bus manufacturers. It's just so challenging. It's a challenging environment from their perspective. And I give them credit as far as balancing inventory, balancing delivery of these vehicles. The margins are somewhat slim from what I understand. And so it's a very tight market. There's only a few battery electric bus, just bus manufacturers in general that currently exist.
Yeah.
And it's a tough market to get into and to stay into sustainably. We saw Proterra come into the market and they're no longer in the market. They've become a new company. And I give credit though to Proterra just because I think they changed the industry for the better. They kind of drove that demand for zero emission buses. But they also demonstrated that it's a very tough market and it's challenging because each of these transit agencies can develop their own specifications and customize the bus the way that they want it, which is incredibly challenging from a inventory planning and financial management standpoint for a bus manufacturer to provide.
Interesting. And what is the time frame from like getting an order for a bus to actually being able to deliver it? Isn't it quite long too?
I think the timeframes have gotten longer, unfortunately, with some of the supply chain issues.
Mm-hmm.
And so it can take anywhere from 12 to 18 months from when you order the bus, where it gets into the production line, and when it's finally delivered. I think a lot of bus OEMs are really struggling with some of the demand, but also some of the delays that they're probably seeing on their side from an inventory standpoint, as far as the
Right.
equipment getting more expensive. Um, and also, I can imagine I would not want to be in their situation as far as what's happening with the tariffs and uncertainty from week to week about inventory costs and whether or not they're going to be able to afford it. And so it's a very challenging space to be in right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, is there like I know there's a lot of the programs we get involved with, there's a drive for Buy America or Buy American compliance.
Yeah,
Is is that a big sort of deal in transit by and large, or is it just sort of um,
oh yeah,
really
yeah. It's
okay?
very significant. It's incredibly significant by America as far as uh, most transit agencies receive funding that's federally funded, and Buy America is a federal mandate. And so if you don't necessarily comply, you're not going to get that funding. And so transit agencies are somewhat constricted. And if they do want to buy uh, equipment that is not Buy American compliant, it has to come out of their own pockets, state fund,
Yeah.
local funds. And they typically don't have as much of that type of funding. And so if they want to go out on a limb, they want to try a bus manufacturer from Europe and test whether or not the reliability is going to be better, whether or not um, the operators are actually going to like the bus better than some of the buses that they already have. It's a risk that they have to take by not being able to use federal funds for that. So
Interesting.
I think there are both benefits and challenges of Buy America, just like with every policy.
Yeah. Yeah. And I guess so. I don't know what percentage of income constitutes, federal funds to these transit agencies, and I'm sure it varies, but it sounds significant, right? So
Yes.
without that, like, you know, public transit sounds like it wouldn't be economically viable. Is that fair to
Yeah,
say?
it's the entire industry is heavily subsidized uh,
Right.
by federal and state funds, and so the amount it costs for a bus to operate versus what they're charging passengers, it's drastically different.
So that has a ripple effect too on the bus manufacturers obviously to keep those margins down
Yeah,
to be able to satisfy these programs. And so to that extent, just thinking about the like what automation could bring, like do you see, like I see these big buses, they're 40 feet long, um, and then there's of course smaller vehicles, there's transit vans, and then there's micro vehicles like the Wave Gem or something, right? I don't know if they're being used much. And then you see some folks looking at some of these more custom or bespoke autonomous shuttles. Like, is there? Do you think transit's going to move in a direction where they're using more vehicles that are smaller in size and getting away from bigger buses? Or, I mean, and maybe buses are for long road trips, or how do you see that sort of shaking out in sort of the coming years, if you have any thoughts
yeah.
on that?
So transit agencies, they operate vehicles of all sizes. There's 60-foot buses, 40-foot buses, 35, 30-foot buses. A lot of transit agencies also typically provide a paratransit service, and that can just be cutaway shuttles, four-door sedans, and so they operate all different vehicle types. Now, how they operate and maintain some of those vehicles can be different. So most often you see paratransit as contracted service, where they hire somebody to operate and maintain those vehicles, and they have to adhere to specific contractual requirements that make sure that they're putting the passengers first. Otherwise, they suffer liquidated damages if they're not operating per contract requirements. So I do think the model exists for transit agencies to potentially use uh, different types of vehicles to perform the same service. And again, I think it just comes down to those use cases justifying the additional investment making sure that it's benefiting passengers and making sure that it's sustainable long term. There was the craze, which I know that you're very familiar with, as far as these automated shuttles, where transit agencies were demonstrating and piloting these throughout the country to try to determine, hey, is this a new service that we could provide? And I think a lot of transit agencies saw the benefits of these shuttles, but there was also some challenges from these shuttles as well that I think that they posed. And I think it just comes back to, based on the vehicle type, the capacity of the vehicle and the requirements of the vehicle, where should those vehicles be operating to
Yeah.
optimize the experience, right? And so it's the use case first that drives it.
Yeah, and so it's interesting. What do you there? And I know of those companies, and one of which was Local Motors, right? And they sadly went out of business as a company, and there are others that were here and have come and gone. What do you think the I guess what drives in your mind the interest from transit agencies to because to me there's automation and then there's vehicle platform, and they could be you know like like independent of automation. What makes those that form factor of autonomous shuttle like the Locomotors or the Easy Mile or the Navias attractive and of interest to transit agencies? Like why is that of interest?
I think transit it varies from transit agency to transit agency. I think constantly transit agencies are looking to continue to innovate. They're trying to find new forms of service to attract ridership. That's how transit agencies are funded by the feds. It's mostly just based on the number of passengers that you provide daily service to, and then that's your formula of funding as far as how much funding that you get per year. And so transit agencies are continually trying to find ways to increase their passenger count, so that they're pulling more people out of vehicles onto the transit system, and then everybody benefits. And so I think there was a large interest to determine whether or not this different form factor of a vehicle could entice and provide a new type of transit service, that would get more and more people out of their individual cars and into these types of vehicles. Because at the end of the day, whether a vehicle is moving only 5 to 6 passengers, or if it's moving 45 to 60 passengers, it's still better than individual.
Gotcha. So what's the difference in your mind between like those kinds of shuttles, like the Navias or the Locomotors, and say a body on chassis van, or a transit van of some sort? Like what? Because like those one category exists because they use them in transit right now, right? Like body on chassis vehicles for paratransit and just whatever. Like, so what's the difference between one versus the other? Is it
Yeah.
just the look, or
Well,
is there
yeah, I
some
think it's. I
function?
think. I think it. There's definitely a look
Yeah.
that's attracted a lot of attention, and I think the body on chassis vehicle approach. It was built for the road. It was built for adherence to NHTSA, all the requirements that a vehicle is supposed to safely adhere to. Whereas I think the automated shuttles, they were designed for automation first, as far as to take advantage of the technology, how to use the technology effectively, but not necessarily built for all different road types, road tested for different road types, pavement, gravel, and so forth, where these shuttles, the cutaway vans, the 15 passenger vans, are more accustomed to. So I think that's kind of a key difference. And also, and this goes back to the transit background, is the useful life of the vehicle. I think there's still a lot of unknowns about how long do these automated vehicles last, the body of the vehicle themselves, how long do they last, and then the technology, how long does it last before you need to slowly start replacing it.
Yeah.
And so that's a big question for me. It's always been a big question for useful life of these vehicles. So I think
Yeah.
that's a big difference between the two.
It's interesting. And I mean, I love architecture. I love new innovative designs. So there's that one sort of side of me. It's like a schizophrenia. It's like I love the look. I love the innovation. But then there's the, form versus um, function factor. And the only, I guess, is it maybe the only functional difference might be advantage. Like some of those shuttles have they're low to the ground.
Yeah,
So you can
which is
have
a
a
big help.
wheelchair just sort of just come right on with a ramp,
Yep.
versus using a lift.
Yep.
And maybe that's an advantage. But like then again, there are actually some other just roadworthy cars that have that vehicles that have that too. There's like a Dodge van that's, transit vans, and so there are vehicles that are just human drivable that have that capability now too. So, but maybe that's like the one maybe advantage or
Yeah,
function advantage. I don't know.
curbside loading, that's a big
Yeah.
advantage. Uh, dwell times are of big focus for transit agencies, minimizing dwell times, and so boarding and alighting is key for
Hmm.
those on-time performance. So I do think it's a factor, and again, I think that goes back to the use case standpoint of where the vehicles are circulating, and if it's just neighborhood circulator routes, maybe that's beneficial. I also would love to see some potential long-term policy changes as far as drivers that maybe should or should not be actually operating on the roads. I would probably fight this if I was 92 years old and wanted to go to the grocery store, but should I be getting into a car and driving? And I think folks asking those hard questions may also pinpoint where we need to go from a transit agency perspective, and also
Right,
how
right.
autonomy plays a key role in all of this too, right? And so there is some potential future use cases too as more and more folks begin to evaluate um,
I think about that as
driver
my
readiness.
son is getting up to the age of getting a driver's license, right? And I'm thinking like I'm starting to make the argument. I'm like, hey, we humans weren't supposed to be driving cars. We can only run maybe 15 miles an hour if we're like fast.
Yeah,
And our eyes and our perception system just isn't fast enough to get into a vehicle at 55 or 65 miles an hour and respond,
right.
like
That
we
quickly.
didn't
Yeah,
evolve to that. Like our physical body didn't evolve that way, but we're in these machines that propel us at these speeds, and that's why we have accidents and what have you. And he's not buying it. He still thinks he should drive a car, and he's already
yep.
looking at them. And but but I'm thinking like that is irrespective of that. I really think ADAS is such an important step because what we're just this head sitting in one spot in the car with eyes that face forward and can only see so much, and we've got distractions in the vehicle and in the environment.
Yeah.
Why not put sensors all around every vehicle, and especially public transit vehicles that are large, and just detect things that are bad, and at least alert the driver. And then if you can take the corrective actions, which is the next step of ADAS, right?
Hmm.
Do that, right?
Hmm.
And that just seems to be like a no-brainer. All that technology is there, like right now. Just why not? Shouldn't we be just doing that like across all vehicles?
Yeah, I mean the data is there that it shows that it improves safety in these vehicles, and I think more and more policy mandates are coming. Whereas far as we saw, I think it was last year, NHTSA released a policy statement saying that reverse cameras on all new manufactured vehicles are mandated, which is great. That's a step forward in the right direction. I guess I have a question for you, Paul. Is as I'm driving some of my cars, there's the ADAS features that we have on our cars. I have a Toyota Sienna just because I have three small kids and I need the room. And I've often wondered, I turn on my signal if I'm going left or right, and I have, the object detection in my mirror saying, "Hey, you can't turn here. There's a vehicle behind you." In my blind spot detection, right?
Yeah.
But I'd love your perspective as far as what I'm so nervous about is what do I do in the day when that uh, object detection signal doesn't come on, and I switch over to a lane and get into an accident? That's what's always, and these are the types of questions I always have about the technology. As far as you get so accustomed to it, you get so used to it, and you get reliant on these safety features.
Right.
What are the
Right.
mechanisms in place to make sure that, hey, we've installed this system, this is the way it's supposed to perform, and if it doesn't perform, what are those safety guards to make sure that these passengers aren't going to get in incidents when this technology fails? That's to me, it's always something that I've
Oh
curious
yeah,
about.
the over reliance on something that might not be fully baked, right? Is
Right.
is the issue. And there's a classic story, and I don't know, it may be an urban legend, so, but it's a fun story to relate, of like when cruise control first came out, just cruise control.
Mm.
And it was in an RV. Um, there was an RV accident. Again, this may be legend, and the guy was asked, well, what were you doing? He was like, well, I was in the back getting something out of the refrigerator because I had the automatic cruise
Yeah, because
control
why
on.
not? Yeah.
and and again, I don't know if that's fact or fiction,
Yeah.
but it's a fun story, and it speaks to, as a story, the fact that, yeah, you start using a function, you get reliant upon it, and then when it doesn't work, is, because of some edge case or some situation, um bad things happen. Obviously, I wrote a paper recently about, because I've been thinking about this for a while, and there's all kinds of qualitative statements about, well, yeah, I think robo-taxis will be out there next year, and you hear everything from all these manufacturers. We're going to have this feature for full autonomy of our vehicles coming in 2020, right? And here we are in 2025, and
Right.
not a there aren't autonomous vehicles everywhere yet.
Right.
And so I tried to take the perspective of, like, can you quantify this? How do we quantify timelines? And I realized, of course, it was going to be different for different use cases. Like, robo taxis are different than highway trucking. It's different from transit on certain
Right.
fixed loops. It's
Yeah.
different from military. So these are all different use cases with different severities and situations. And I came up with a model. It cut two ways to tackle it, which deals with how much test time do you need, because there are reliability functions and things like that that apply to this, right? And how much test time do you need? What's the pace of technology readiness? And I come up with some crazy numbers for robo taxis that say it's out there, like, it's not tomorrow, it's decades away. But like, public transit on circulators may be happening sooner. But like, the same thing you're talking about for like the general consumer application, and this is like L5 automation. Like, to me, that's according to, if you follow the math, it's 40 years out, right? And that may be crazy. Um, but and then sort of bringing that back to your question, how do you know? I mean, it really deals with it. Really, there has to be sort of the test time, and I also believe there are, certain redundancies of if there's a safety function for, where you're going to take truly try to take the driver out of the loop and let them rely solely on that function, you have to have an independent sort of certified system that's more easily verifiable and validatable, verifying that the system's working correctly. I think that's the path. I think that's, it's there's cost associated with that,
Right.
and there's time, and but so I think just people being aware that these ADAS functions, you still have to be cautious, and you turn them on at your discretion, and they can help, but you still got to keep your eyes on the road, because otherwise the alternative is might be more negative. It's like, well, then, yeah, you can't rely on them all the time, these ADAS functions,
Right.
so just don't have them.
Right.
So we're just taking them away. Just turn them off, and then you don't benefit from all the scenarios where it could have helped you.
Right.
I see it helping, like, right now, and just driving cars with it, and warning me of things, and my wife of things, and certainly the case with the transit vehicles. It's definitely helping.
Right.
So
No, yeah, it's just again one of these instances that keeps me intrigued and focused on the development of the industry, which is it's going in the right direction. And I have another question for you. So, different autonomy providers have their own preferences for the type of sensors that they use, their own algorithms for how the sensors perceive certain things and how they program the vehicle to react. There is different types of for these onboard computers, the brains of these vehicles, how they interpret and store information. You know this way better than I do. Some of these autonomy providers have all of the, what I call them, brains on these individual vehicles, but I've noticed that some of these autonomy providers, some of them, will share information across their entire fleet, and they're starting to take advantage of, the learning capabilities of all these vehicles, and then sharing and spreading how these vehicles detect certain objects in certain instances, like these edge cases, and then they share those lessons learned across, obviously, this fleet in real time. I see benefits of that as far as quicker adaptation to the technology improving, but I'm sure there's risks. I would love to hear your perspectives on that and where that goes
oh,
in the future.
it's a great question, and obviously there are plenty of caveats and sort of if this then that. But I think, like, real time learning without direct humans inter supervision is fraught with peril.
Mm-hmm.
Because you don't know what it's learning. You kind of have to kind of make sure that it's learning the right thing, right? And how do you know that? Who says that, right? I think, like, a human being has to, in many cases, make that judgment call, in my opinion, right?
There has to be
Especially
some sort of
for
validation, human validation. Right.
Verification and validation, right? And um so, and a lot, neural networks, and which is, what most people think of AI means other things but neural networks. But deep learning and neural networks, and that form of machine learning, is a very probabilistic based approach, right? It's kind of, our brains are, don't work dissimilarly. That's why we make a lot of mistakes as humans. But it's a probabilistic approach to the more data you have, the more accurate the assessment gets. And so if you're just learning across a fleet of 10 vehicles, that's certainly a lot different than learning
Right.
across
Hundreds.
data
Yeah.
coming from a million vehicles, which is pretty much what you need, right, for it to
Yeah.
be to get to maybe effectiveness.
Right.
So that's another caveat. And, like, it depends on how many vehicles there are. And of course, you're going to be learning in simulation, because that's where you can have, millions of virtual vehicles, but then that's not necessarily the real world if the simulation doesn't match the real world. So there's a lot of caveats to the answer to that question.
Yeah.
I think it's generally, you can see improvements, but you can't know for sure, because something that's probabilistic is not by definition deterministic, and you can't verify and validate that it's correct and complete. You're I think maybe there will be a tipping point, maybe at one point in the future, and I don't know when that is, where these learning systems are just are just so darn good that, yeah, you're going to be living with non-determinism, but
Mm-hmm.
it's you've tested it across enough things, and that that it's right. But that's not now. Like, that's not right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so a lot of caution, in my opinion, and should be had when you're deploying systems that rely heavily on machine learning and that kind of unsupervised, closely scrutinized learning systems. I know all these many companies are using it and doing it, but I don't think they can't prove that it's correct and complete.
Right. And this delves into more of a philosophic conversation, dreaded years in college. But I guess, I don't agree or disagree with your point on human intervention just because I don't know the technology near as much as you do. And I think you're absolutely right. It's dependent on a lot of use cases. What's interesting, I asked the question too, as far as mandatory human intervention on how automated vehicles perceive things, objects, and how those vehicles should react. Human intervention, what constitutes that individual who's intervening to make that call and say, yes, John Peterson intervened and he decided that the vehicle should act in a certain direction. Then I struggle with, well, if how are we defining human intervention and who's double checking that? You know what I mean? And so it's I don't know. It's interesting.
It is. No, it is. It is. And it should be not one person, right? It should be, there's hazard analyses, right? That in classic methods for determining, issues, you identify an issue, you ascribe the likelihood to it, the severity of it, if it occurs, you chart out mitigation mechanisms, like what can mitigate this, and then you look at the residual risk, what's the residual likelihood, the residual severity, and then at some point you're accepting a certain level of risk, right?
Yeah.
And those mitigations are things that, like, a lot of people take these mitigation steps qualitatively and just sort of intuitively, like, oh, I'll just slow the vehicle down, I won't let it go above 25, or I won't let it go, or I'll make it, or I have these 10-mile-an-hour shuttles, right?
Yeah.
Or I'm only going to run it in these sort of super controlled environments, parking lots and stuff. And so it's like, well, that's not very useful.
Right.
But yeah, it's definitely requires, more than one human being in the verification and validation process. And there have been attempts over the years at, I don't know if you've heard of formal methods, right? Where you can, it's very difficult because in to apply in our space, but for railway, which is where I got my start in graduate school, right? Because you spoke of rail transit,
Mm-hmm.
It was a little bit more viable to apply formal methods because you could define the state space of the application and sort of know as many conditions as these switches and signals can get into, right?
Right.
And prove that it's correct and complete. But like when you get into these environments where there's 100 moving objects and they all can have different trajectories and what have you, like the state space explodes.
Yeah.
And formal methods just collapses.
Yeah.
So formal methods was the supposed answer to proving that it's correct and complete, beyond humans making mistakes in that assessment.
Yeah. How you talked about, your graduate school days and getting a start in rail, which I always love to hear. What was your biggest foray into automation? How did you first start? I think I've heard rumors you entered this competition, right? With
yeah, well, in grad school I was doing safety critical systems analysis, right? So how do you verify and validate that the system is correct and complete, right? So
I was not doing that in college.
No. Well, I was doing other things too in college,
Yeah.
It's not, can't have all work and no play.
That's right.
But I think, and then I did go and work for GE and Harris Corporation, working on what was called positive train separation, which was the precursor to positive train control, which I also worked a little bit on. So that was automation of trains. but yeah, the it was the DARPA the automation thing was, I had a just come off of like another company that I had started and was kind of winding it down. I'd made some money. I was trying to figure out the next thing, and I wanted to get back into like robotics and AI, because I've been doing neural networks since like the 1990s, right? Um, and and so I started tinkering with a robot around the house, and it was chasing my cat, and I figured that's not like probably a saleable application. But then I had a friend from who's actually a college roommate, um, uh, call me up and tell me he was working as a program manager at DARPA, the arm of the Pentagon, that does all the research. And he's like, they're doing this cool thing where like they have like vehicles that are going to travel from LA to Las Vegas across the Mojave Desert. And I know you're doing something with robotics, and I figured you might want to know about it. And I'm like, well, whatever I develop will be eaten by buzzards in the desert. I'm just doing small vehicles.
Yeah.
And then he's like, well, but there's like a $1 or $2 million prize. And I'm like, oh, that sounds exciting. It's
Right.
so that really kicked it off. I really think DARPA did an amazing thing with that race. These prize-based programs, like including like what they do with Peter Diamandis and the crew at like with the X prizes and the DARPA Grand Challenge is all modeled after. I think like there was that challenge back in the day to fly across the Atlantic, I think, or something like that Lindbergh won. And that was the Orteig Prize, right? So back in the 20s or 30s, whenever that was. But DARPA sort of carried that forward with this DARPA Grand Challenge, and it spurred a lot of interest outside of the traditional big universities and big supply companies to participate, including my own little endeavor at the time. And so that's really what drew me into automation for vehicles. And we have DARPA to credit for that. Probably a lot of people who've started these companies, Chris Urmson from at Aurora, and and many of the folks have their ties to that event. So
yeah, that's how that goes back to the importance of federal funding. That's how SpaceX got their funding, through the NASA COTS program. That was a competition, right, to kind of reimagine how we can do space travel. So yeah.
Well, this is such a cost-effective way, like prize money.
Yeah.
Like it's crazy because it just appeals to human nature. It appeals to their ego, that fame and fortune, right? Like we like all these people want to be the prize winner, and it was like it's $1 million.
Yeah.
Like, what contract are you going to get on where it's like, hey, we want you to build a fully autonomous vehicle. And this was, of course, 2004 and 5, and here's $1 million. Do it, right? Who would have done that? A lot of these groups spent like tens of millions of dollars on these programs just to win $1 million. It was a great
just
thing.
For the prize.
Just for the prize and some pizza at the end. It was nice.
Yeah. No, that's fantastic. And I think it's those instances that as far as the accomplishments, and I think the future accomplishments that are still to come with this technology are going to be pretty exciting. And I'm glad we're in the time that we're in, because I think there's more coming, and I'm excited to see where it goes.
I am too. And, Jensen Huang, I'm hoping I'm pronouncing his line, but the gentleman from NVIDIA, the CEO, just said yesterday that this is going to be the decade a few days ago, this is going to be the decade for AVs and robotics. And of course I was thinking, damn, I wish you told me that like 2 decades ago. I would have done something else for a decade or two.
Yeah.
Okay, this is the decade. What do you think? I mean, do you think this is the decade for autonomy and automation for transit?
Yeah, this industry unfortunately suffers sometimes from over marketing and hype. We were supposed to have automated vehicles everywhere, and several years ago, and everybody promised Teslas would be automated in 2016, 2017. And I think it's the promising of when this technology is going to mature is always kind of a challenging place to be. I think it's going to evolve, and I think we're going to see improvements. But knowing where the transit industry is, and knowing the technology and how it needs to advance, I still think it's going to be some time. Transit, unfortunately, it's continuously suffering from lack of funding, even though they provide vital service to communities across the United States. So until there's proper investment within transit agencies and the circumstance can be more competitive and where they have more control over what vendors are providing them, I think that technology is going to be a little bit slower to adopt, but I think it's going to come around. And I think the results that we're seeing from some of these early deployments, what I'm hoping is going to entice the industry to say, hey, my buses are breaking down in revenue service like every week. And if we had this technology, I could keep X% of buses out on the street, and that's going to reduce my cost. Yes, I want this technology. And so I think the FTA is doing a good job by allowing this grant opportunity to exist in USDOT for further investing in this technology, because I do think it has a place, and we need to continue to try to push. But there has to be kind of this clear path of, where do we go? What is the long-term viability of this technology, and are we going to service and maintain it? So we'll get there. It's just going to take some time.
Well, it's fascinating. Sev, I thank you so much for your perspective here. This has been fascinating conversation as usual when we have them, and but I'm glad we could do one here on the Driven Show, all about AVs, robotics, and AI, and I think we touched on just about all of it. But specifically, as a first for the series, its application to these bus yards and buses and some of the economics and factors behind that, I think is fascinating, because it's going to drive the adoption rate. And really appreciate your perspective and info that you've provided here today. So thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Paul. This is great. Great way to start our Friday.
Awesome. Well, we'll do it again. I have my my cup of coffee here,
All right.
and it's almost done. So it's usually the time to go refill and
Same.
end the
I'm empty. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, Paul. This was great. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. Take care.
I hope you enjoyed the show Driven with me, Paul Perrone, your host. Don't forget to check us out at driven.show on the web, and give us a thumbs up or subscribe here if you like the show. Thank you for listening in. See you soon.